Pacers Nation. You are listening to the Pacers Post Up, brought to you by the brothers of basketball, Brad and Ryan, a part of the Believe Sports Network, presented by FanDuel. Pacers fans, let's get into it.
All right, Pacers fans, we are back for yet another episode of the Pacers Post Up. Ryan, it is part 2 of our Eastern Conference power rankings. The East is as deep as it has ever been, and we are spending a couple episodes here just unpacking team by team. If you have not watched part 1, be sure to go back and check that out. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts today. But we've got to sort of pick this thing up because now the conversation starts to get really interesting. Ryan and I have been pretty much aligned up until this point. There's a little tease from the last episode. We're going to pick up your 7th ranked team because we sort of exposed that you had Detroit at 6 as we came out of last episode. But this has been a lot of fun. And I think that from a Pacers perspective, this is what you want, right? Yeah. You want to be going up against some of the best. You want storylines, you want rivalries and narratives. And as we start to get into the top half of this conference, I can think about storylines and narratives with pretty much every one of these teams and history with the Pacers, whether that's more recent in the Halliburton era or Paul George era, Victor Oladipo, all the way back to Reggie, blah, 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 blah. So with that said, let's hand it over to you. Unpack your 7th ranked team, and then we will kind of get into the top 6. As we already know, you had Detroit at 6. I had them at 7 over in part 1.
Wow, way to set it up because I didn't know how you would land that, catching it up on the 1. So if you didn't catch our previous podcast, we are now in my final 2 tiers. And so the tier we're working with is the Love Island tier. I have quoted it's all been based on reality TV shows. And this one is, I like the star. I think it's going to be flashy on certain nights, but I just don't know about the chemistry and the fit. And that one is the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I couldn't have put James Harden probably in a better tier. That's probably of all the reality shows he would want to be on the most. I'm sure he would get enjoyment out of that. But we know the story with Cleveland at this point, and transparently, the last 2 off seasons or postseasons have not gone their way. They lost. They finally made the Eastern Conference Finals, but really weren't competitive in that Knicks series. We took it to them in 5 games the year before, and their roster just no longer makes a lot of sense to me. They keep going the wrong way. I alluded in the last podcast that they had that 64-win team, kind of built it a little bit on defense, then some crazy offensive pieces, but now we're going backwards because you have James Harden, the human traffic cone that you're trying to play on the defensive end. Donovan Mitchell tries, but he's not very talented. And now you're losing a lot of your depth pieces that people liked. You know, Dean Wade's out of there. Keon Ellis is now somebody they had to move around. And they've got contracts like Schroeder that nobody really wants. He was virtually unplayable. Like, you've all taken these steps backwards. And so I just don't think that they can compete with some of these teams above in the East. We're talking about the Pistons and some of these teams here forward because they are less deep than they are last year. The fit is worse. Harden's going to be worse. Evan Mobley has not taken the step forward that everybody's dreamed and hoped for years. He is just a very, very, very good defensive player, very limited offensive player. He's really meant to be more of a 5 probably, but not big enough to be it, so you got to put him next to an Allen. I don't even know if they're going to be able to retain everybody when we're talking about come the deadline. They might even have to move off pieces. They don't have a lot of assets that interest me if they were talking about the deadline. So I do think there's enough talent here when we're talking about some of the teams that we mentioned below, the young teams like the Charlottes, the Magic, the Hawks, that they have enough experience and enough star power to go beyond those teams, but nobody above them in these next tiers.
Ryan, I had him at 6, so it works out perfectly. You had Detroit at 6, Cleveland at 7. I have Detroit 7 and Cavs at 6. And it's for all the reasons that you really just unpacked. I don't love their cap sheet. That's one of the first things that I look at and I say, where are you paying guys? I mean, Evan Mobley's going to be making $60+ million here in a couple years. Donovan Mitchell's going to be $70+ million here in a couple years. You've still got Jared Allen on the extension north of $30 million. I'm not sure I love that. I mean, is he a top 10 center in this league? Maybe. I know he's been an all-star and had the 82 games played a couple years ago. But, yeah, if you look back, that 64-win season almost at this point feels like an anomaly, right? Because we're sitting here now watching what they did in that Pacers series. They go 5-1. Eastern Conference Finals last year, I believe, was 5-1 to the Knicks. And their spirit and will was just broken after that first game. They had the epic meltdown and then ultimately kind of just didn't even show up. No. And that's James Harden for you. I'm sorry. And Kenny Atkinson, if you look at the metrics, we won, and James is a good isolation defender. And, I know he won Coach of the Year a couple years ago, and good for Kenny, but some of the stuff he was saying last year didn't really add up. And so much like that, I don't think their roster really adds up from how their cap is allocated, where the talent really comes out. You're now going to have to pay Harden because that's going to come. I mean, you miss out on the LeBron sweepstakes. I saw that they're going to sign Mario Hezonja, who's a former lottery pick. Okay. He's coming over.
Game changer.
Right. and that's kind of my point, is that you've swung and you've missed and you've swung and you've missed, and now all your eggs are in a good, not great player in Evan Mobley and a guy in Donovan Mitchell that, I'm sorry, that the narrative starts to solidify when you just don't get it done. Yep. And I know he's been a first-team All-NBA kind of player, but it just hasn't been there in the postseason. He has not been able to get, whether it was in Utah or now in Cleveland, not get over the hump. Last year was his first conference finals appearance, and it was basically a no-show after that first game. And so it's just one of those things where I look at this Cavs team and I say, if you're a Cleveland fan, you can probably talk yourself into something glass half full. They have enough guys where I do think they're better on the top end than a team like Atlanta or a team like Orlando. But depending upon how a Jalen Johnson develops in the next couple of years, or even Apollo, Franz, whatever, that may start to shift a little bit. So I had him at 6. We've kind of unpacked. Where do you go now as we get into 5?
Yep. 5, and the final one in my Love Island tier is the Toronto Raptors. And asterisk on everything we're about to say, because I'm basically going to walk under the assumption that Kawhi Leonard is a Toronto Raptor. And it's hard to think that it's not going to be the case, but in case something happens, obviously you have to change that. And I think the Raptors showed some stuff last year. Again, they played well, and now they add a true bona fide star. Kawhi Leonard last year, when the Clippers got off to their historically bad start, basically rallied them back into the play-in single-handedly. At large parts of last year was a top 5 player in the NBA. And when he is going and healthy, that is what he is. And the good news for Kawhi on some of this, at least from a regular season perspective, is the Raptors probably have enough around him to still be competitive on nights when he's not there, where the Clippers really didn't going into last year. And so you look at that, they have a lot of defensive talent that's going to be tough. RJ Barrett's got size for that 2 position. We know what Kawhi does. Scotty Barnes is an all-defensive caliber guy. And so you have that. Even Jakob Poeltl's got some size in there. But similar a bit to the Heat, I wonder how does this look in crunch time and with shooting? Because if you look, let's just focus on their starting lineup. Quickly, I think he's a 37% career three-point shooter. Barrett, I think, is like 34 maybe. Kawhi, obviously great shooter, so not going to go on down there. Scotty Barnes, I think, shot like 30% last year from deep, and Jakob Poeltl's not even putting him up. So you look at that, and I just wonder if these teams in the East that are going to be in the top tier all seem to have a lot more shooting and offense to go to. And I will give them credit that in the late game situations, Kawhi's probably one of the best at the league of just getting to that pull-up jumper that's automatic. So that is something they can lean into. but I'm looking at it as a whole. The reason they're not higher is I just do think offensively there's going to be a little bit more clunkiness to it. But why they're above the rest of these teams is I like Kawhi when healthy, probably better than any star below them. If you're talking about even where Giannis is at in his career right now, Donovan Mitchell, Cade Cunningham, I do like the peaks that Kawhi does. But this all comes with an asterisk because if Kawhi's not healthy and it's trending each year, we're kind of playing, 50-50 at best at this point. If he's not healthy, this team goes lower. But I do think that for them, this was a smart move and gives them a chance to think they can talk themselves in to being an Eastern Conference Finals team.
Ryan, I've got Toronto at 5, so we're not moving off too much as Bruno, my cat, jumps into the frame. So those that are watching on YouTube, hope you enjoy a little feline appearance here. Not much we can do here in the office as far as that's concerned. Ryan, how different are the Toronto Raptors with Kawhi Leonard than the LA Clippers with Kawhi Leonard over the last couple of years?
They're younger. At least they're healthier around him, would be my argument.
Yeah, I guess I'm just looking at it and I kind of say all the things you say are true. Kawhi, when healthy, when available. I'm going to get Bruno out of the frame here. Still one of the premier players in this league, right? And so I don't want to take anything away from him. Scotty Barnes has been a real riser, okay? RJ Barrett, size. Do I love Quickly on the contract that he's on? Not really. I mean, Colin Murray, Boyle, Shed. The depth is shaky there for Toronto, in my opinion. You mentioned the shooting; that's a problem. They're going to be big. I mean, they're going to be massive. And we were on the Setting the Pace a couple of days ago talking about some of the Eastern Conference and how it shakes out. And I thought Alex made a really good point that Toronto could be a tougher matchup for the Pacers, particularly because of that size, and we've struggled with it over the last couple of years. I just can't put them above 5 because of Kawhi's availability. The shooting is not quite there for me. I'm just, Scotty Barnes is like, there's so many things that I like about him, but again, he's kind of like Apollo to me, where is he really ever going to put it all together in a way where you say, okay, that guy can be somebody leading you to a championship? Because frankly, how many more years does Kawhi have of being that true guy? Maybe 1 or 2. And I know, LeBron's playing into his 40s or whatever. Kawhi does not strike me as that guy. He has had an injury-riddled career, and as good as he still is at his best, we saw that in the All-Star game and things like that. There's just enough cause for concern that I can't put them higher than anybody else on this list. And that's probably where I go. We'll still have to see how everything shakes out from an aspiration, Clippers, etc. perspective. But it's Toronto at 5 for me. And now this top 4 starts to get very, very interesting because these are all teams that are going to dominate storylines for a number of, I'll say, good and bad reasons. Okay. And I think the team that would have been higher on this list for me coming into this offseason is the team that I have at 4, and it's the Boston Celtics. If Boston does not make the move with Jaylen Brown that they did, I like some of the things that they've done on the periphery. You sign Mitchell Robinson, that is a huge get. Is he a guy that can play 35 minutes a night? No, I don't think he is. The Hack-a-Mitch is a real thing. I'm not sure his motor is there at the size that he's playing at right now. And he's played smaller, by the way, and maybe he tries to do that with a Boston team that does like to get shots up. But make no mistake about it. He is a monster on the offensive glass. He is a guy that can change the possession battle in games, and he's very versatile on the defensive end, and they didn't have anybody close to it last year. I know Cato was fine. They made the acquisition for Vucevic, whatever, but then you're basically swapping out Jaylen Brown, former Finals MVP, top 5 scorer in the league, for Paul George, who is going to be 37 at some point next year, had some flashes in the postseason. I'll say Philly did outperform a little bit of what I thought they would this year, but I don't love the idea of now PG's, going to be, he's not 2015 Paul George. No, we're way beyond that. And so I think Boston gets a little bit worse. I know that this is now clearly Tatum's team. They're very high on Peyton Pritchard. They're very high on Hugo Gonzalez, and they didn't want to include him in a Giannis trade. And I hope I got his name right. I'm not sure. Here's what I'll say. Boston is still scary. I think they're a well-run organization. Paul George still has something left to give, but are they better than they were? I'm not so sure, and that's why I've got them at 4.
Yeah, I've got him at 4 as well. And it's a lot of what you just said. The Paul George thing, people are going to point to the idea that Paul George had kind of a resurgence in the first round of last year's playoffs, had some moments. He also took 25 games off, quote unquote, took 25 games off. That helped him be healthy and lead into that. I'm not quite sure he's going to get that same break right before the playoffs start where he can kind of lean back into it. I also just struggle. They're going to be a team who does largely want to focus. Missoula's obviously, I think the Celtics have led the league in 3-point attempts the last 3 seasons or something like that. That's going to have to change a little bit because Derek White hasn't shot the ball particularly well over the last season. Peyton Pritchard stepping in is going to be, but their hopes on him are a little exaggerated, calling him the next Jalen Brunson leap, which we'll see. Maybe he's got a big leap in him, but that seemed a little lofty. I love what you said about Mitch because, yeah, he can't give you 35 minutes, but if he can give you 20, 25 minutes, they're elite 20, 25 minutes. They are a game-changing. He's going to swing a run somewhere in there with an offensive rebound, a put-back tip, or a defensive just getting his hand in there, forcing a transition play or a steal. I like all that. I just am with you where you lose Jaylen Brown, who you can say what you want, what was going on outside of the court, but him and Tatum's fit over the last decade has basically been the most successful duo in the NBA through that period. They're not too far removed from a finals appearance. I still do like Mazzulla as a coach. I think Brad Stevens is smart. They've got some assets to work with. You mentioned they've got some young guys off the bench that Sam Hauser's grown into a role. Jordan Walsh has grown into a role. Catus grew into a role last year, so they're still going to be able to go 9 or 10 deep. And I just still see them. Tatum's going to be, in the Tyrese bucket if he'll be 17 or 18 months removed from an Achilles injury and we start the season. So they're going to be really competitive. And they, by all means, can still win the East. They have the talent. They have the organization. Tatum still, on a nightly basis, if he gets back to his highs a year before, could be argued as the best player in the Eastern Conference. And so they were scary, but they were my most scared, least favorable matchup I would have chosen coming into the offseason. That is no longer the case at this point. Yes, I do still think the wings and their speed and that kind of counteracts how we play at certain times, but losing what they have, just adding some of the pieces on the edge, and Paul George, who is a 50-50 chance of even playing multiple playoff games, I think they're just a little bit lower than where they have in years past.
Yeah, here's how I kind of look at it. This is not the same Boston team that won the title. When you talk about Drew Holiday, you talk about how Al Horford was playing, obviously Brown and Tatum and Derek White. I just don't think they're as good as they were. Tatum coming off the same injury as Halliburton, so that's going to be a conversation. I think he pretty much answered that with what he did in the back half of last year, and I think Tyrese is starting to answer that with some of the stuff that we've seen. It's just not the same injury that it was, 5-10 years ago.
Daniel Jones is back, full participant. 7 months later.
And that's where I'm getting at. Is like, this is just not what it once was. And so Boston is a team. I love what you said. If they won the East next year, I would not be overly shocked. And in fact, FanDuel's got them as the third best odds to win the East at plus 500. So, this is a team that's going to be a part of the conversation. One caveat: if somehow Paul George does give you a sustained run of what we saw in last year's postseason, it changes the math a little bit for me. Because he's somebody that I think at this point of his career can be effective without dominating the ball. And that answers a little bit of a conundrum that Boston always had with the Brown-Tatum duo. And so I don't know what was going on inside of that locker room. I don't know where Jaylen Brown's head was at as far as wanting to be a star and didn't want to be there anymore. Boston was ready to move off. Something happened. We'll see if it pays off. Right now, Brad Stevens is a little bit under the gun from a fan perspective, because on paper, I don't think it's that great of a deal, as my cat loses his absolute ever-loving mind here on the broadcast. Point being, I am curious what Boston will do. Brings us to number 3. I have a very sick feeling that we're going to be too aligned here. I go Philly at 3. And here's why. We unpacked a lot of the LeBron conversation on part 1 of this series, all right? And we'll get to some of that. I am of the belief that when you do this, I'll call it star stacking, that we have seen really in this super team era that started with the decision in LeBron in Miami. We had KD and Harden and Kyrie, and we've had KD and Dylan Brooks and, Bradley Beal, and there's been all kinds of iterations. I mean, I even think back to, think about some of the names Houston has tried out over the years.
Yeah.
They've had Chris Paul and James Harden and Carmelo and Russell Westbrook and DeMarcus Cousins and
Dwight
John
Howard.
Wall and Dwight Howard. I mean, we have seen teams try to stack stars together, and it's almost never this perfect puzzle piece fit. And I think that is the top end talent gets them to 3 for me. When you talk about former Finals MVP Jaylen Brown, who I think is arguably the best player on this team, okay? And he won't get that kind of shine because there's guys in Maxey and Embiid that have been there in Philly. Obviously, LeBron is LeBron. Embiid was a Finals MVP. But this, make no mistake about it, they've got guys. They're now going to bolster up the bench. We saw the KCP news getting out of Memphis. They already made the deal for Simons on a pretty team-friendly contract. Dean Wade making, I think, somewhere around $8-10 million a year. So they're going to find a way to bolster this thing up, a la Shane Battier, Mike Miller in Miami all those years ago. And that was something Alex Golden brought up on our crossover over on their channel. But to me, this is the point that I guess I'm trying to get at through all of this. LeBron James has wrecked teams. His ego, his need to be the man, his me, it's all about me narrative has frankly destroyed a lot of teams. And it's why, Ryan, he has not been a part of a relevant title conversation for almost a decade. If you take out the bubble title, which if that doesn't have an asterisk around it, I don't know what does, okay, from an NBA legacy perspective. The rest of it, I mean, they made it to the conference finals in 22-23 and got swept by the Nuggets. When is the last time you looked at a team that LeBron was on as the, focal point and said, that's a team I think is going to win a title?
Yeah.
It just hasn't happened.
It's been a long time, and I have them at 2. So we will get and the reason I maybe have them a little higher is when you have that much star power on a given in and out night, like when Maxey just has it, LeBron doesn't have to have it, Embiid doesn't have to, Brown doesn't. He might win you a game alone. And so when you have 4 guys who can kind of go in and win you a game, that rises it to me of just, even if it's clunky, it might work. Now, I don't say that like this team just walks in as unbeatable. I mean, the defensive end is going to be a major struggle. You're going to be able to score on this team. And especially if Embiid's in and out, so who's playing center at that point? Even are you putting LeBron there? There are ways to go about this, and Jaylen Brown is actually going to be the one to ask to do the most defensively. I'm not sure that's what he wanted to do when he envisioned getting out of Boston, who had some of the best wing defenders, guard defenders in the league around him, and even centers when it was Horford and when Porzingis was even healthy, another guy who could protect the rim. And so I think there's a lot of clunky fit here, and just is the usage rate we've come up. Who's going to take it one night? LeBron's going to be the main ball handler. What does that mean for Maxey? Do they run? How does Edgecombe leap now that he's the 5th option? And Embiid shakes this whole thing up because when Embiid's on the court, you have to play through him, because if not, he's just standing there and he's going to clog everything up to a certain degree. Now, albeit he can shoot, but it's still guys will sag, guys will move because he doesn't have the mobility he used to have. So I hear you. I think we're pretty aligned on this. I'm maybe a little bit higher just seeing what Maxey did in the playoffs last year. Had some just outrageous performances. VJ's really seems like one of the top upcoming guards in this league. Jaylen Brown, obviously, but they got to figure this out. And I love your comparison about all these teams who have tried to add all these players, and it almost has never worked, maybe outside KD going to the Warriors, but that was a team that already functioned, and it was a glue piece, and they were just adding one in. This is an entirely new team. And don't mind you, even Maxey and Embiid haven't played a long time together, really, in the roles they're at. VJ's completely new. Now he's thrown into a new system. Brown new, LeBron new. This is going to take a lot of time, and I think best case scenario, honestly, for Pacer fans, if you're trying to avoid the Sixers, which don't get me wrong, I want to beat LeBron. I want to take one down. I want him in the matchup. But don't be surprised if this team come December is still 500 and there's some teams in the East, maybe some of those younger teams, the Hawks, the Hornets, that have caught some fire and are towards, the top third of the East. And now all of a sudden the Sixers are dying to get even to the 6th seed. And then who do they draw first round? Are you playing a Celtics? And all of a sudden now it's a really interesting first round matchup because I do think there's going to be clunky. Embiid's going to be in and out of the rotation no matter what. So will LeBron. Like, they're going to be that team that we see where it's like on any given night, who's really playing? You know what I mean? Like, who's going to be in and out? Do they have the chemistry? You'll start hearing, well, with LeBron and Embiid and this, they're the highest ranked team in the league. And then I'll be like, the sample size of 2. Like, because, who knows when it's kind of like that Nets team where it was like Kyrie, Harden, and KD, who are you getting on a daily night? Like, you just don't know. But because there is so much star power, 4 all-NBA talent players, if they were all on their individual teams and fully healthy, they'd all probably get an all-star nod. And so that's why I had them at 2.
Yeah, I can't argue it. It's going to be fascinating to watch. I am just of the mind, for the reasons that you said, continuity matters, understanding how the team fits together. The backup center thing is a real conversation. Like,
very real.
There is not a lot of depth there. I mean, are you going to run essentially LeBron at the 5 if you bring Dean Wade in at the 4? Now he's playing point on one end and he's playing 5 on the other at 42, 43 years old. I mean, I understand, he's a specimen and his longevity is probably going to be the thing that gets talked about most 10, 15 years from now because of how long he's been able to play at a high level. It's going to be interesting. I have him at 3. Ryan's got him at 2, which brings me to my number 2.
Yep.
And I know that for those watching that maybe are not Pacers fans or regular listeners to this show, this will not be a popular take. For those that are longtime regular listeners, this will be a very popular take. I have the New York Knicks at number 2.
Love it.
And here is the reality. New York got a cupcake run through the NBA Finals last year. And I'm going to spell this out as best I can. Hawks, way too early. It just moved off of their, franchise, whatever team. You get the conference finals. I know they had, who was the second round series? I can't remember the next played. It doesn't matter. They've swept the Sixers, Embiid, Paul George. Yeah, of course. So you get to the Cavs. Cavs were never supposed to be that kind of team. They trade for James Harden in the middle of the year. That was strange, I'll say, at bare minimum. And then, frankly, the Spurs took out the toughest team in the OKC Thunder. As soon as San Antonio won that series, I said, they're too young. It's too early. The Knicks have too much continuity, too much physicality. The writing was on the wall. I had already prepared myself. And the biggest part of this entire conversation is they didn't have to face the team that's had their number. And make no mistake about it, we have had their number for the last couple of years, regular season, postseason. Tom Thibodeau, Karl Anthony Towns, Julius Randle. I understand changes have been made. All through of that, one thing has been consistent. The Pacers have been better than the Knicks. Yep. And so that is why I say, New York, congrats on your title. It is a title. You can't take it away. I would love to have one with all kinds of asterisks and cakewalks. So kudos on you. I'm being very biased in my take here openly. Yep. But I do not think that this Knicks team is better than the Indiana Pacers. I don't think top to bottom. I don't think Mike Brown's a better coach. I don't think Jalen Brunson's a better lead guard. I don't think Karl Anthony Towns is a better number 2. I don't think Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, and OG Anunoby are better supporting cast than Aaron Nesmith, Andrew Nembhard, Obi, TJ, and you add Oubre into that mix, etc. They lose Mitchell Robinson. We already talked about that with Boston. I think that is a much bigger loss than they're kind of making it out to be. And frankly, I don't think they will have as much edge coming off of a win. They've already got it. And I think that plays a factor into the psyche of how these teams are built. I understand they're the champs. So as long as they're the ones kind of holding that, Larry O'Brien, they're going to have their ring ceremony, hang the banner, all that. They're the team to beat. Yeah. I just don't think they're better. And that's why I have them at number 2.
Yeah, I like where you ended that because it is really hard in the NBA to win a conference, let alone a finals back to back. And there's a lot that comes with that. And a good example is the Thunder from last year. All of a sudden, you're the team everybody's out to get. Every night, it's them against the champs. And now you have teams lining up behind you who are basically strategizing the whole season around beating you. And that was the Spurs. And we saw what happened when they ended up matching up at that time. Another reason is just, and kind of what we saw, the Knicks played a lot of games and a lot of minutes last year. That's just... That takes more of a toll than they think when you're talking about trying to play 2 seasons back-to-back with playing 200 NBA basketball games. And albeit some of their guys, let's be completely honest, are not, the pinnacles of health. OG Anunoby's had a lot of health issues for us. Josh Hart has had a lot of health issues before. Karl Anthony Towns has. And Brunson's put on a lot of minutes and miles in his run there. Now, I don't say that to say, obviously, we hope we get a full, healthy matchup against anybody, but you have to take those things into account because the Knicks going into next season, every time a even lowbrow team is going to that building, they're trying to take down the champs. And so I think that makes it tough on them. The Mitchell Robinson thing is absolutely massive. It's hard to really quantify what Mitch did for those teams. Like, there were times I was way more scared of Mitchell Robinson than Karl Anthony Towns on the court. In fact, I was begging Karl Anthony Towns to get back in so we could at least exploit him defensively, where it seemed like Mitchell Robinson was just causing havoc on both ends, whether it was causing steals, deflections, blocking shots, or on the other end, getting offensive rebounds, putbacks, lobs. And he just had a motor that was different, and not having that spark plug will change things and put more pressure on Karl Anthony Towns, who's a guy who can get into foul trouble, has issues. And I'm with you where it's hard to keep that edge going into the next season. I mean, we saw this with the Celtics when they won. Missoula's whole thing was trying to get rid of that title, erase it from their brains, and they couldn't. They just couldn't the next year. It was in their heads, and they ended up getting bounced by the Knicks, ironically, that year. With all that said and trying to talk them out, I had them at 1. I had them at 1.
Puke.
And so let me do my spoiler, because we clearly have both avoided one team, and that's what this podcast is about in the Indiana Pacers, where I had them 3. And for Pacer fans who are frustrated, or others who are looking at saying these biased nut jobs are always putting the Pacers at the top, the one thing I would say that puts this asterisk is just Tyrese has not played basketball in 16 months. As much as I feel like a guy who has the feel that he does, the natural ability, the pep in his step, he's doing between the leg, East base dunk. 16 months is plenty of time to get your full burst back. I just wonder, are we putting high expectations that we could get off to that start? Is the whole team going to gel? And there is a little bit different now with Zubats. Offensively, this style is going to have to change without the pip and pop threat, but more of just how do guys move? How do you guys space off of Zubats? Because I actually believe there's going to be more space because of his size and physicality, but there might be an adjustment period to that. I say all that, if he comes out game 1 and looks like Tyrese, bump him up to number 1 on the list, because our matchups against every team, we know what we can do against the Knicks. We've beaten them. We've proven it. I like all the things about LeBron. Defensively, we are going to attack their bigs relentlessly. And we're going to run them. So they're going to have a hard time keeping up with that, even though they do like to run themselves. The Celtics, like you said, unless you're getting a really high-level Paul George, I think lack a little bit of star talent. Then Raptors, Pistons, we can all know why I think those matchups would go our way. I guess maybe I was just trying to avoid the completely unbiased take, but as long as I can see Tyrese get out there and look the way I expect him to, they're number 1 on the list. I just want to see it.
Ryan, I am going full bias nut job on this show, and I always do. Yeah. I don't care. We're fans. This is a fan-driven podcast. I'm sure there's a million critiques.
You called our way to the finals.
Here's what I'm going to say, okay? The reason that I have Indiana number 1, and I know that this is wildly unpopular and out of left field for most of people across the NBA landscape, right? Make no mistake about it. The Indiana Pacers are the 8th favorite in the East right now on FanDuel. It is plus 1,400 odds. And I am telling you, Pacers fans, I think it's a good bet. And the reason I say that is a couple of things, all right? So let's unpack the Tyrese injury. Set aside what was one of the more hype videos you're ever going to see. The Tyrese Eastbay dunk that came out. If you're listening to this, I'm sure you've already seen that video. If you haven't, please go find it on Twitter because it is well worth looking at. By the time the postseason comes around next year, it's not going to be 16, it's not going to be 18 months. We're going to be talking about 20 plus months from this injury. And this podcast really is about who do you think has the goods to go the distance in the postseason. And I look at our roster and so many of these other teams, whether it's the Knicks, whether it's Boston, whether it's Philly, Toronto, Detroit, Cleveland, Miami, we've said it from all of them, top to bottom. Yes, some of these teams you could argue are talent rich, 1, 2, 3. None of them have the depth that the Pacers do. I mean, we are talking about legitimately 10, 11, 12 guys that could be vying for rotation minutes coming into this season. And I sit here and I say, the postseason has been where we have shined the last couple of years. You mentioned pace, running teams up and down the floor. We're already built for that, right? Philly on paper can play fast, sans Joel Embiid. We'll see how that all figures out. They still have to figure out scheme. They still have to figure out defensively, what are they going to do? How are they going to handle, who's on ball, who's off ball, where are they getting shots, all of that. I just love that our system has proven out in the postseason to be one that matches up against teams really well. And the point you're making earlier in the show is Philly could be a 6 seed. They could be a 7 seed. New York could be a 4 seed. Miami could be a 2 or a 10. We just don't know how all this is going to shake out. And so if you're the Pacers and you're a team that because of your style of play and because of your depth, you match up well against a lot of different teams, that to me is what takes Indiana from 8th on FanDuel to what should be one of the top 2 or 3 teams in this conference. We are going to have the ability to match up well against all of these teams. Yes, size and physicality have always been our bugaboo since we've gone to more of this pace and space, but you add Kelly Oubre Jr., you add Zubats. Those are 2 guys that were directly hitting the nail on the head, addressing physicality and size in the middle and a wing defender. Like those were the big things. And now if a Jarris Walker takes a little bit of a step forward, if a Johnny Furphy comes back, that is a name that nobody around the league is even thinking about going into this season. And Pacers fans know that if he comes back and is healthy, he could be in a playoff rotation. For sure. Very realistically. And so I just look at this and I say, why would I not think that our team should be the favorite when I truly believe we are upgraded from the roster that went to Game 7 of the finals 2 years ago? I think Zubats is better overall and is a plus add over Miles Turner. You and I were never in on the Ben Mathurin experience. I would take a solid perimeter defender who cuts and knows his role in Kelly Oubre Jr. over Mathurin's 1 game 3 that he's going to give you 10 out of 10 times.
No question.
And so I know, again, there are some in Pacers Nation that are going to say, we love Ben, he's a superstar. This is about finding guys that fit. And it is our system that is what has carried us because of who Tyrese is. All these other players fit so well around his ability to orchestrate. And I am of the opinion he's going to be back. This guy is wired different. He is not like Victor Oladipo. He is not like Paul George. This guy is different. His mentality, the chip, the doubting, the overrated, all of this bullshit, make no mistake about it. It is fueling Tyrese Halliburton in this comeback. And I think he is going to be a man possessed to get back to where he was. And that is why I have Indiana number 1.
Gosh, I love it. And you almost convinced me to jump right in and switch my rankings because I love all the points around this roster now can match up against anything. And just let's talk defensively for a second. We know Tyrese is kind of the weak point, but he can usually play on the 2 or 3 guard that falls out. Nembhard is a plus defender. Nesmith is a plus defender. Pascal, if you haven't been watching, has really turned himself into a plus defender. Zubats, all defensive second team, and really just clears up all the things that Miles wasn't great at defending. Finishing possessions, post defense, the ways we used to get bullied with the physicality that you alluded to changes now. And in fact, I can think against some of these teams, we're going to be able to enforce our will a little bit. These guys are all grinders. And we talked a little bit last night or with the Setting the Pace guys about our youth and players, and we didn't even talk about guys who still have another leap. Aaron Drew Nembhard is just taking step after step every season, and now we're going to be coming off a season where he was asked to do everything, and now he's going to have the second best defender on him or one of the worst defenders on him. He's going to be able to move way better. His defense is going to get right back to the level we're used to. Nesmith is a guy we saw started to hone in a little bit on attacking those closeouts, attacking with a little bit more consciousness, not as craziness, but the elite shooting. Pascal looked as good as he'd ever really looked in his career. And the Zubac beats, we keep telling people, just wait for you to fall in love with them. The Clippers fans could not have spoke higher about a guy, and Tyrese is literally the perfect player in the NBA to put him with. And then we still have the best bench because of what you alluded to. TJ McConnell still had his step last year, is going to be great. OB, looked amazing even in the late, actually looked like he had a little playmaking to his game, which is going to be really nice. Huff will see, Kelly Oubre's added. And then if Walker or Furphy, if one of them takes a step up, this is an elite roster with elite depth that can play big with Oubre at the 2. We can go down small with Nesmith at the 4. Like, there are so many different ways we can play this roster. And I'm with you, where this team, one, has never lost a series where Tyrese Halliburton finished it, so we need him to be healthy, but with a healthy Tyrese, and this team is so hard to beat in 7 games. We run you down, we pressure you in ways you cannot have. Nobody else is like Andrew Nembhard, who can pressure you 92 feet for 7 straight games. And that is what he does. And oh, by the way, when you're done, TJ McConnell's coming in on you next, or we might just throw Nesmith. Like, we hound you and hound you and hound you, and we're going to win late games. We're going to play well. And so, fuck it, they're number 1 on my list.
Yeah, total nut job. That's where we're going. That's why you listen to the Pacers Post Up. Ryan, what was the final tier called?
Oh, I didn't even get to it.
We got to put the reality TV bow on this entire conversation.
The last tier was the Golden Bachelors. They bring the experience. They've all been there. Of all these teams, the Celtics, Pacers, and Knicks, they've all been to the finals. LeBron obviously brings finals experience. So I had the Golden Bachelors as the last one.
I think the original Golden Bachelor is like a Westfield, Indiana resident. I think he lives up at Chatham Hills or something like that. So local ties. And listen, Pacers fans, call us crazy, call us whatever you want. If you don't think that there's a reason to get excited for next year, I don't know what you've been paying attention to. Bring on Giannis in Miami. Bring on the Knicks, the title, championship defending Knicks. Bring on LeBron once and for all. We have an opportunity to avenge so many demons throughout this upcoming year. And the demon himself, Tyrese Halliburton, I wouldn't want to be riding with any other guy. So let us know what you think. We still have our giveaway going. This is probably going to drop on Thursday of this week. We're recording it earlier in the week as kind of part 1, part 2 of our series. So giveaway is live. We will announce a winner on Saturday. Check it out at Pacers Post Up on Twitter. We do have an August giveaway waiting in the wings. It's going to be a pair of tickets, just as a little tease for something that's going on in the back half of August. So be sure to look out for that after we announce the winner of the Hallie ones. Ryan, anything else before we wrap up part 2 of our Eastern Conference Power Rankings?
No, just talking Tyrese basketball is incredible, and we're not that far away.
No, we're not. Pacers fans, it's going to be August before you know it. September is training camp time, October preseason, and then we'll be off and running. So, Pacers fans, as always, appreciate you guys listening. Go Pacers.